All right, everyone. Well, thanks for coming out today on this beautiful day. Very glad to have you all here. My name's Ryan. I'm the chair of the Maoist Communist Union, and we'll be joined today by Fred Engst. He'll introduce himself in a minute, but I'll just say a few brief words about this event. First, the Maoist Communist Union, or MCU, we're a communist organization here in the United States. We host some studies, we organize in the unions, and more broadly, we're working to build up a working class communist party. Because our view is that we need to actually, in order to overthrow the capitalist class, to have revolution, we need an organized force. The ruling class, the capitalists, they're very organized. They have a very powerful state machinery, and in order to confront them, spontaneous street protests and random strike actions are totally insufficient. Not that those aren't important, but those by themselves cannot achieve victory. And we're not just aiming to do the right thing, but to win, and to then establish a socialist society and fight to abolish classes. With that basic perspective for what we're doing, and that's a lot, but that basic perspective, that's just the foundation, it's important to understand, in order to succeed, the lessons from the last, well, especially 200 years of class struggle under capitalism, but also the lessons even before that. And one of the most important periods in the entirety of the history of the world, but especially the class struggles, is the Cultural Revolution in China. These 10 years, spanning 1966 to 1976, where there was an unprecedented effort to fight a revolution after the revolution. That is, to stay on the socialist road and avoid the restoration of capitalism. And this struggle was so inspiring that people around the world, from the Black Panther Party to the Naxalite movement in India, to the Philippines, to May 68 in France, in Italy, in Mexico, and around the world, were inspired by this struggle. And we're very lucky to have Fred here today to talk about it and its relevance for us. And this is the 60th anniversary of the launch of the Cultural Revolution. So Fred, you want to introduce yourself and then jump right into it?
Okay, well, strange to have this white guy talking about Chinese Revolution. Uh, well, I make a long story short. My parents went to China after World War II. And it was inspired first by Edgar Snow's book, Red Star Over China. And that's what inspired my father. And my father and my uncle were roommates. My uncle is Bill Hinton, who wrote Fanshen in China. And he was inspired by the same thing. But my father, through my uncle, my aunt, learned a lot more about communism. But he was just a upstate New York dairy farmer and was really curious about what's going on in the world and find out he can raise the cow and see the world at the same time. So he quit farming in 45 and signed up to join the army to fight Nazi. And the day he sold his cows and the war ended. So he went to China instead. My mother actually is a nuclear physicist, participated in the Manhattan Project. And after U.S. dropped the bomb, she was devastated and lobbied for civilian control. She thought everything was fine because the laws passed, Truman signed it. And then after 2 years in University of Chicago, she found out her scholarship came from the Navy. And so basically there's no way to escape. And if you want to learn physics, and especially she's in experimental physics, not like theoreticians, and everything that you do will help the US make bigger and better bombs. And so she has no choice but to leave. And so my father had a crush on him. She was not into romance in the early days, but eventually she went to China in 48. And that's how I got born and raised in China. And then, let me see, I mean, there's a long story, but I was a Cultural Revolution baby in a sense. When the Cultural Revolution began, I was 14, and I was part of the Red Guards and traveled and enjoyed my time tremendously. So when China-US relationship got better in 71, a lot of my relatives and friends from the US went to China. That brought my enormous curiosity, so I decided to come to the U.S. and I came in '74, and I worked in various. First, on my uncle's farm for one season. Then I worked in Philadelphia, different odds and ends, and I was a UAW member for almost 10 years. Then the factory I was working making rail cars went bankrupt, and so. But that's also I put myself through college, and I was really confused in the '80s because when I first came, I was raised in China with all Marxism, Maoism, Cultural Revolution. I thought I know everything, and come to the U.S., I find out eventually the rug's pulled under me because China is denouncing the Cultural Revolution, denouncing Mao's period. I was really in crisis in that sense. So struggled a lot and went through college trying to understand what's going on, and that didn't help. And then went to graduate school, and that didn't help. But the reality helped. I mean, U.S. didn't stop being imperialist power, and China become capitalist country. So everything during Mao's period that we were learning, we were scared, and we were worried about it, came true. All right. So Marxism was validated, and to my yeah. So I decided to after spending 30 some years in the U.S. and I decided I wanted to go back to China because the key question I want to answer is how to prevent revolutionaries becoming new oppressors, right? So in the '80s, it was a part of the labor movement. I even went to Labor Note. Everybody here probably knows it. And people there talking about socialism. I said, well, I saw it and then it failed. What happened, right? So without knowing what's the future of the labor movement, I don't know what we're struggling for. We can find a bigger pie or take over the pie. And those people says, you communists, you see, you said you take over the pie and then you become a new oppressor. I had nothing to answer to that. So I decided to go back to China in 2007 and trying to study the whole history. And it was really rewarding. So today is actually right now, it's May 16th, all right? We are 15th, but China is 16th. And that's when the Cultural Revolution first started, all right? So I don't know how many people know about the Cultural Revolution. This was 10 years, the most complex struggle the human race ever encountered, all right? That's a bold statement, okay? So I need the facts to back it up, but we don't have that much time. So today, I think that what I can do, trying to think what would be relevant to the people in the U.S. And I've been going, before I left China this time, I went to Europe, I went to Germany, went to French, talking to all kinds of Maoists and other progressives and labor movements. And so I'm and I asked people here many years, like, what does Maoism mean to you, okay? I mean, for an industrialist country, I mean, for India, for Philippines, we know they have armed struggle, surround the city with the countryside and all that stuff, but that's not relevant to the U.S., not relevant to Europe, as far as I see. Or some people believe in the universality of a people's war. I don't know what that means. Okay. I mean, I talked to some people in France and I got better understanding of it, but still, I mean, but that's not a relative struggle. So what does Maoism bring to the progressives in the West? All right. So today I will focus on this question about how to build unity. So my title will be Build Unity Through Struggle. All right, a Maoist view of the inner party struggle. That is not only inner party, but it's within about the whole labor movement, whole the progressive. All right. So today we're commemorating the 6th anniversary of the Cultural Revolution. All right. So what is the relevance to Cultural Revolution to people in the U.S., to people in Europe? All right. That would be a great question. So how do you address that question? All right. And so we first have to understand what the Cultural Revolution really stands for. All right, in hindsight, all right, at that time, there's all kinds of talk and all kinds of pronunciation, but it's the first time in the working class anywhere in the world that has the most long-lasting, the most in-depth, the most comprehensive, and the most and to explore what does that mean for the working class to be in power. Think about that. I mean, Leninism told us how to take over the power, all right? How to build, how to establish socialism. But what do you do after you took over the power, all right? So Cultural Revolution it touched every worker in every factory, every peasant and every collectives, every students in every school, every office workers in every institution, and every city dwellers in every city. They have to think about what is socialism? What do we mean socialism? How to build socialism? How to overcome obstacles towards communism? So as one can imagine, every brand of ideology stubbornly will manifest itself. There's no, and so no one is immune. That was what? 600,000, a million people, all right? And no one's immune. You might have few people immune, but 99.99% people are immune from what happened in China those days, all right? So, but in short, what the Cultural Revolution stands for is what I said, that how to prevent revolutionaries become new oppressors, right? And that's the question that haunt me in the 80s, 90s. Without answering that question, working class lost its aim, all right? What do we want? So for sure, there are many great achievements during the Cultural Revolution in education, in healthcare. Everybody heard about the barefoot doctors, all right? And how to manage factories, how to manage farms, and how to manage schools. And all these things are great achievements that during the Cultural Revolution. And so this is a greatest demonstration of democracy under dictatorship of the proletariat. And I was so puzzled in the 80s and 90s hearing people denouncing Cultural Revolution. I just couldn't understand why you're denouncing Cultural Revolution if you believe in democracy. Oh, that's not democracy. Well, tell me what it is. All right, tell me what it is. When everybody in every factory, and in every farm, in every school can speak up about what to do, and then they trying to find out how to manage factory, how to manage schools. That's not democracy. What it is. All right. So, so really to understand the complexity of the Cultural Revolution, we need to compare what's going on in today's world. We know people are not happy. We saw it, all right, especially in front of ICE. All right, so people fight back. And however people fight back, they know what they don't want. But what they do want is quite often very confusing. And not only among the masses, even among revolutionaries. They have very different idea about what they want. And that's where there's a lot of controversy about, all right? So the same is true about the Cultural Revolution. There are things that people don't like, people don't want. They fight against oppression. But what do they want? What do they want instead? All right? So they don't have a clear understanding. At the end, the Cultural Revolution failed. It failed to prevent capitalism taking hold in China. Of course, there are some people, I don't know how they think China is still a socialist. I don't know what criteria they use. Well, I mean, if you think about state intervention in economy as socialism, 90% of the country are socialists, probably.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, so we're talking about socialism in a Marxian sense, right? Must be working class in control. And a working class in control, not just in your constitution, not just in your banners. It has to be demonstrated, all right? It has to be proven. And so one thing I found interesting studying the Cultural Revolution, because so many people, intellectuals and others claim to be progressive, says working class was never in control in China. I said, where's the evidence? They said, look, all the leaders came from peasants, from landlords, from capitalists. Oh, in that case, British under Labour Party is socialists, right? They're all workers. And so you cannot go by the background, the leaders, to judge a nature of a party. And so I said, well, then I study a lot more about the Cultural Revolution, especially the lot of clashes and violence and killing each other. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, I mean, China was, during the Cultural Revolution, it was on the verge of a civil war, many places. So let's think about it. To have a civil war, don't you have necessary at least one side is ruling class? All right? I mean, Spanish Civil War is the people against the ruling class. American Civil War is two ruling class killing each other, right? I mean, the Chinese, the factory workers fighting each other. Which side is ruling class? All right? They both are ruling class. They're fighting each other. All right? So that is evidence. So the armed conflict during the Cultural Revolution is terrible things. A lot of tragedy happened. But to me, that proved that working class is in power. All right? I mean, try to have a civil war in your factory under capitalism. All right? I mean, so somebody was telling me in China, they says, well, there's no, we need the democracy and everything. I said, well, don't you have in the Cultural Revolution? That's not democracy. I said, well, I mean, if you have a factional fighting in the capitalists, you're faced with machine guns. All right? So the armed conflict among the workers proved that working class was in power. All right, question is how to prevent from killing each other. All right, so now, what is the main reason for the failure of the Cultural Revolution to prevent capitalism? I would think the most important reason is because the Vanguard Party actually failed to abolish a system of bureaucratic privilege tied to your rank in the government or in the party. So you have a system that you, as you rise up in the government hierarchy or party hierarchy, your perks and salaries and everything goes with it. And once you get demoted, you lose everything accordingly. And that's poisonous, because what it does is change the nature of inter-party struggle from truth, how to build a socialism, to one about power and privileges. And imagine, you see, these revolutionaries before 49, they risked their life fighting for revolution. And there's no, I mean, there's small differences. I mean, of course, and you can't have total egalitarianism. I was arguing with the guy is in the Progressive Labor Party. He's a nice guy, but he had this egalitarian idea. So, well, in Long March, you only have that many horses. All right. So he says, okay, we have one horse, so everybody have to share. All right. And also, it's cruel, very cruel. For example, there are a lot of soldiers wounded, but we only have medicine for a few people. Who do you save, a soldier or a general? All right. So these are tough choices. Egalitarianism means the failure of a revolution. You cannot have egalitarianism. So, okay, so you preserve some kind of rank. So the issue is not whether we have ranks and we have different cordings, but the issue is, once you have these ranks, do they tie to your promotion? And so basically, what we find out is the Cultural Revolution was the first time they decouple a person's ranking in the government, in the party, to the ranking in economic well-being. So the first time a worker can promote to a central committee, like Wang Hongwen, who from Shanghai went to Beijing as deputy chairman of the Communist Party, he still get his wages from Shanghai, 30, 60 some yuan per month. It was tough for him. You know why? All these generals, all these big shots, they have few hundred yuan per month. They smoke good cigarettes. They drink good teas. And Wang Hongwen can't afford it. So when he goes to their house, their office, they offer him cigarettes and tea, and they come to his place, he has nothing to offer. All right, so I mean, there are real things that egalitarianism doesn't work, but however, first time in Chinese history, I think maybe anywhere, persons rise up are not tied to their well-being, economic well-being. That's very important. All right. So the failure to abolish that from very beginning breeds a whole class of cadres who care more about their standing in a hierarchy than how to build socialism. All right. So that is the material base, what Mao coined the phrase capitalist rotors. All right. So with that material base, you have people in the party actually care more about their ranking in the bureaucracy than how to mobilize the masses and so on. And there's a whole lot of story. So that's the main reason, okay, because you have whole that apparatus. But then the Cultural Revolution, even though abolished that, but it's coming too late. You have a whole entrenched ideology, the personal relationship, and so you have an interest group, a built-in interest group to defend their perks and privileges. So as during my study, I came to summarize the capitalist rotors with first staunchly defending their bureaucratic privilege. What I mean by bureaucratic privilege is the tying, the close association between your position in the party, in the government ranking, and your economic well-being. That I call it bureaucratic privilege. That is bourgeois rights that don't need to exist under socialism. The workers, to each according work, the more harder you work, the more you get paid. That you cannot abolish, not until you have to each according their needs, like under what Marx talked about in a critique of Gotha program. All right. So am I right? Is that,
Yeah.
Okay.
He's referring to that. That's communism, not socialism.
Yeah. So as long as you have to each according work, and then people care about their income, but that should not be tied to your rank in the party or in the government. It's not like the higher you rank you are, you're working harder. Come on, 8 hours for everybody, or maybe you spend a few more hours. Okay, and so so the first thing is staunchly defending the bureaucratic privilege. Secondly, has to do with the what's the word in English? I wrote a lot of stuff in Chinese. I have to translate. Okay, in a hostile to supervision by the masses, and that is most telling example started in 1957 during the anti-rightist campaign. The effect of the anti-rightist campaign is denouncing to the whole world, you cannot speak bad about leadership in the party. All right, so nobody dared to speak up, and so the third point is that you use the capitalist logic to build economy, and so you have material incentive, bonus system, everything, because capitalist rotors they worship this incentive system, so they think others like themselves. All right, so they don't believe in a socialist method of politics in command, ideological works, and class struggle in terms of promoting production. Anyway, so that's the when the Cultural Revolution began. You have a whole lot of people in the leadership committed this tendency of capitalist rotors. However, we need to distinguish between diehard capitalist rotors and subconscious capitalist rotors. What's the subconscious capitalist rotors? Those don't staunchly defend the bureaucratic privilege, but they enjoy it. The government, the party says, I'm entitled to this. Why shall I fight it? Okay? And those people also, they're not what's called viciously hate the mass or the mass opinions, but they don't like it. I mean, tell you the truth, anybody love to be criticized? Not I see on the internet, okay? All right. I mean, to withstand criticism is tough. All right. So these people subconsciously capitalist voter. A lot of people in the country, they feel, I work so hard, okay? I work office, I don't have time, I work all the time, every waking minute, and you criticize me. I feel so wronged, right? And so, and it's understandable. I would say majority, the people in different level of the government and the party feel defensive when the culturalists began criticizing them. It's totally understandable, all right? I'll tell you more story as I think about it. You know the Red Guard movement, heard about it, right? Mao is so ingenious, just so genius that he spot Red Guard started with these high cadre children in Beijing, and because Liu and Deng, these people sent work team in the Cultural Revolution after May 16, how to do the movement. Their ideas sent work teams to the schools, to universities, to factories, and not factories, those just schools and universities. And so these high cadre children's princelings, they got wind of this, and so they all agitated. We gotta do cultural revolution. And then work team came in, telling them, don't do this and don't do that. You gotta do it this way. You know, high school kids are rebellious. All right, you experience that as parents. I know, but they're not afraid. Why? Because their parents have a higher rank than the people in the work team came to their school. So they are naturally rebellious in teenager, and they have their parents' backing. So they organize secretly the Red Guards, and they want to carry the revolution to the end. So they secretly organize, then they start writing character denouncing the work teams. And so they wrote a letter in July to Mao, and Mao saw it. Oh my God. He said, this is great. Why? Energetic, enthusiastic, revolutionary spirit, outside the party bureaucracy, party hierarchy. So he gave this to the whole country. Every young people can organize as Red Guards, and that's how I become a Red Guards, okay? Everybody organized their all groups, just like we saw today, internet, so many groups spring up, right? Every city, every place, and so a small group people, we like each other, let's form a Red Guard. And so these people form Red Guard, and then they travel around the country because Mao, first time, August 18th, invited Red Guards from around the country to come to Beijing. And he did that for 8 times, all the way to November, I think, 8 times, receiving these Red Guards. And so that's how the Red Guard movement spread all over the country. So these Red Guards, in Beijing, for example, they travel to Wuhan, to Shanghai, to other places, and they don't know who's the capital voters in local. They said, well, let's do what's the word? I don't know in English. Let's just shoot and see who.
Shoot from the hip.
Shoot the hip. Yeah. But see, it's a 火力侦察. I'm not sure that in English. So you shoot and see what the response is. Okay. So you see the response. So they go to Wuhan. They're denouncing the city officials and the provincial officials, and it says you're capitalist voters. Those who says, oh, good, I'm welcoming your criticism. Oh, they are good cadres. And those says, wait a minute, you are anti-party. Oh, that is capitalist voters. All right. So I mean, that's how the movement spread. All right. And a lot of stories. Go ahead. However, you mobilize the people in the 66, 67. And then you had the Red Guard movement. You have the Shanghai workers seizing the power, trying to maintain the order and rather than chaos. And they formed a revolutionary committee around the country. But then factional fighting intensified. And by summer of 67, the most telling example of trouble was with Wuhan. Is a not the second largest, close to it. It's one of the new industrialized city with the help of Soviet aids. They have many heavy industry in there, so you have a lot of working class there. However, Wuhan is city has 3 towns on the Yangtze River joining with the Han River. So you have 3 towns, and the towns are traditionally the earliest workers were dock workers. Dock workers are territorial when you have 3 towns, all right? So when the ship comes to your dock, I don't get a job, all right? Get to my dock, you don't get a job. So territorial culture is quite pronounced. And so the Cultural Revolution began, and people first, the rebels, students and workers came up, seized the power, and then other groups says, no, that doesn't count. You guys didn't, we're not part of it, so we're going to seize the power. So beginning, the idea of seizing power is go to government office, get the seal of the government. That seize the power. Just a stamp approval. That is the seize the power, okay? Very immature, okay? And so the factions break up, and one says that seize power is great, other one says that stinks. So you have the some claim that February seize power is great, others says that stinks, and they argue each back and forth. And then the local conservatives, they got up and they start armed repression against rebels. So the rebels united, but they ran away. So the violent clash getting more and more intense. And so Mao decided, well, he better go to Wuhan and try to see what's going on. But instead, the local military garrison had army stormed the hotel where Mao was, kidnapped the Central Committee person who, including the Ministry of Security. And so that's a July 20th incident. And so the whole country mobilized, denouncing these factional fighting, these what is called the conservatives. And so the conservatives fall apart. The rebels came up, but then they fight each other over who should be in the leadership. Oh my God, I'm just like, Wuhan is so typical. Every time the rebel being oppressed, they unite. Every time they rise up, they divide. Just back and forth and back and forth. And so by the late 67, early 68, Central Committee took all the rebel leaders, come on, come to the Beijing hotel. You guys have to come to agreement. It's not like a house arrest, but you don't come to agreement, don't go back. So they finally, after a few weeks, they worked out the agreement. But before they went back, their masses in the Wuhan says, you guys are traitors. Oh my God. Yeah, just really a lot of factional fighting. All right. So some places, and a lot of places, when you heard the horror stories, so-called horror stories in Cultural Revolution, you heard a lot. I mean, for the last 60, well, not 60, 50 years, half a century, you heard a lot of horror stories during the Cultural Revolution. If you listen carefully, you find out these are 99% are the results of factional infightings. Infighting. I mean, you have my uncle Bill went to Tsinghua University and trying to in 71. He went there and listened to all the thing about the Tsinghua University factional fighting that came from 66 to 68. Spent 2 years. University divided 2 factions, and each faction occupied 1 building. And first they just writing big character posters denouncing other faction, and that's not enough. They start set up loudspeakers denouncing each other, and that was not enough. They start kidnapping other factions, put them in the basement, and that's not enough. Tsinghua University's engineering school, like MIT, they built missiles fighting each other. And so a lot of horror story. All right, so question is, what do we do? So any people telling me about all the horror stories, I say, I know a lot of horror stories. In fact, you have people in Chongqing, a city where they have armament factories. People are making tanks and making cannons. They're shooting each other. All right. So how to prevent the working class engaging in civil war? All right. That's the issue. So when you face you hear all these horror stories, I would ask them, says, well, do you believe the working class should be master society? If you don't believe it, we don't have anything to say, okay? End of conversation, all right? If you do believe it, tell me how do you resolve factional fightings? Tell me, answer, don't just denounce it. Yeah, we all know that's wrong. Tell me the solution, all right? So in that respect, Shanghai is the best shining examples how to overcome factionalism. And there's a great book called 革命造反年代. In Chinese, in English, it will be The Era of Revolutionary Rebellion. That's a very little translation, okay? Should be a better title. I've been trying to find people to translate that in English, but maybe Google will help me. Yeah, it's really, if you have only one book to read about the Cultural Revolution, that is the book about how a successful working class controlled the city and built socialism. And it have to overcome so many factional issues, all right? However, Shanghai is a minority. Shanghai is the only city has long-lasting working class struggle. And Shanghai doesn't have that mentality of Wuhan, territorial. And so when there are factional fighting, very soon the workers saw, oh, these leaders just want to be in the position of the Revolutionary Committee. That's why they're fighting. Oh, I'm not interested in that, okay? So they did a lot of beautiful jobs. There's a lot of heated debates, of course. Last time I talked to another group about diesel factory. I don't have time to talk about that, but that's a beautiful story about complexity and how they overcome factionalism, all right? So because you have widespread working class armed conflicts around the country, that's why I think ultimately Cultural Revolution failed. Because when the Cultural Revolution made these subconscious, unconscious capitalists become conscious capitalist orders, they realized we need to defend our privilege, okay? So when the workers fighting each other, and they took over the power, all right? So when you have factional infighting, you weaken the working class power, and you enable the capitalists to come to, all right? So the relevance of Cultural Revolution to me, for the Western people today, is same as, I think, the relevance of Maoism to today's world. Without Maoism, can you understand what happened to the Soviet Union? Can you understand what happened to China? Can you understand why the Soviet Union went to Afghanistan? Okay? And so a lot of things you won't be able to understand. Or even today, we are in the Cold War 2.0. Right? For some people, China's socialist beacon, I don't know what to say. All right, I don't know how they judge socialism. Well, one popular says China lifted millions of people out of poverty. All right, that's it. You hear that a lot, right? Well, if that's the criteria of socialism, South Korea is a shining example. 50s and 60s, by 80s, they become an industrial country, all right? And Taiwan is a shining example. I mean, all these 4 tigers, Asian 5 tigers, all right? So that is no criteria, my God. I mean, you claim to be a Marxist? All right, so, but I understand people see that because they hate U.S. imperialism so much, anybody against U.S. must be our friend. Well, in that case, German could be progressive. They were against British Empire, right? In World War II.
That's how they sold themselves sometimes. They
were
against Anglo-American imperialism. The Nazis said
that. Yeah. And also Japanese did the same thing, all right? Yeah, Asians take care of Asians. All right. Yeah. So that's why I just find these people. I had a lot of argument with these people. They're in China. They are Western progressive in China, and they think that's a shining example. I don't know what to say to them. All right. I'm sorry. I mean, hard to swallow sometimes. Okay. So what can Maoism offer then? All right. What Maoism can offer is to, in the industrialized country, how to conduct struggle within the revolution movement. I think that's relevant to us. The first shining example of Maoist method is the political struggle within the party in 1942-44, that period. This is called the Yan'an Rectification Campaign. And it's really worth study that. I mean, that's Mao's approach to inter-party struggle, different from Stalin's approach, okay? Incredible differences, all right? So basically, so that's the best, the early example. Then the second example is the Cultural Revolution, because Cultural Revolution is about how to engage inter-party struggle, because these are capitalist rotors, but the nature of capitalist rotor, other than the diehard, they are not enemies. They're not enemies. They are like the subconscious, unconscious capitalist rotors, right? Who enjoy bureaucratic privilege and doesn't like to be criticized, all right? And borrow stuff from the Soviet Union incentive system and thinking workers only care about their wages, not trying to mobilize them to be master society. And these are understandable, all right? So now think about it. The reason Lenin and Mao were able to lead two successful revolutions was that they were sincerely believed the struggle for unity among revolutionaries. Struggle for unity. Struggle unity. Isn't that a contradiction in term? On the surface, right? That is dialectics. How do you have unity? You need consensus, all right? You need some kind of common understanding. So how to build that? You got to struggle. The purpose struggle is to build unity. Isn't that so dialectical? All right. So, so the key is how to fight against revisionism, sectarianism, dogmatism, without splitting the revolutionary movement, and how to struggle for unity. These are actually, the way Mao conduct inter-party struggle, almost identical to what Lenin did. However, Mao articulated, summarized it, and systematized a lot more than what Lenin. Lenin was not able, didn't have time to do that. All right, for one thing. And so what I'm about to say about how to struggle for unity is based on what I'm studying, the history of the Cultural Revolution and the struggle within the working class in China, but also the left movement around the world and the left movement in China today. Yeah. So basically, what I'm going to say pretty much is translation for what I did a few weeks ago in a social, what I call it, social media, and people. There's a lot of infighting among the left in China, and a lot of it is not fighting for unity. It's fighting for turfs, and it's sectarianism, very severe. And so basically, I find that might be the most relevant for us to talk today. All right. So how to build unity through struggle seems to be the important lessons for us to learn from the Cultural Revolution. And so let me see. Some I went through already. Okay. And we all know the slogan. I mean, May 1st, I participated in May 1st parade and demonstration in Philadelphia. People says, the people united will never be defeated. We all know that. And we know only unity brings us strength. And yet, the leftists around the world are so divided. Why? All right, so the reason the fragmented left can afford to split one after another is because the price to be paid for split is minuscule. Precisely because the lack of influence, all right? The left has no influence. So what's the consequence? Splitting, all right? Just feel bad heart feelings, all right? Yet having divided, and so left has no influence. It's a vicious cycle, all right? The reason you can split, I hear so many people, splitting here and there, and they all have good reasons. But they can afford to split. Red Army cannot afford to split. Striking workers cannot afford to split. Any serious revolutionaries cannot afford to split, right? And so when there is factional infightings within revolutionaries, at least one side, maybe both sides, are not taking the revolution seriously. The Communist Party of China, since its founding in 21, more than 100 years ago, at least during Mao's period, they did not split. The reason that they did not split is because, think about it, these people are engaged in armed struggle. Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping, all these people, and Zhu De and all these people, okay? Mao was demoted many times in the party struggle. He lost out quite often. And for many years, nobody wanted to talk to him, even though he found the Red Army base, all right? But they didn't split. Why? Because Mao knows very well these people are revolutionaries, all right? So basically, if you are serious revolutionaries, you have to trust the people. They want to make a revolution, so you have to try to persuade them, all right? So that disunity among the left, what's causing it? I think there are two things. I think the most fundamental reason is because the left around the world, and especially during the Cultural Revolution, failed to distinguish between two very different types of contradictions. Those contradictions between working class and capitalists, between people and their enemies, are antagonistic, irreconcilable. My English is poor. Okay, you know what I'm saying. And there's no, let's put it this way. Another type is contradiction among the people, all right? So, psychology, all right? We learn psychology. We need to understand, we need to have how other people feel, how to put yourself in other people's shoes. Those are all work, the contradiction among the people. But when it comes to worker and a boss, put myself in other people's shoes, okay? And a wolf wants to eat the sheep. Let's talk about it, okay? And so there are two different types of category contradiction. When you have fundamental antagonistic interest, there's no room for compromise. There's no room for negotiating. No room for let's unite, okay, not fight. And so there's two different, very different type of contradictions, all right? The way that you fight against class enemy versus you fight against wrong ideas among the revolutionaries are vastly different. Your goal, your aims are different, all right? So we need to distinguish between our struggle, our differences is about our aims, or we have different means to achieve those aims. I mean, you make that distinction, then you Sometimes that's very hard to distinguish. That's the truth, because revisionists, when I say I'm a revisionist, come on, criticize me. All right. Same thing during the Cultural Revolution. I mean, how do you know? Who do you know who is the capitalist voters? Right? They don't have a label on their head. And so basically, and particularly opportunists, revisionists, will twist and argue and say, we have the same thing, why are we fighting? And they feel so wronged, all right? Why do you make it big fuss, all right? So it is very hard to distinguish. However, having an analytical tool says, okay, our difference is about aims or about means. Give us a starting point to analyze what is the true nature of our differences. All right? So, let me see, okay. Because struggle within the revolutionary movement often are life and death struggle. Because if you have a wrong line, you will fail, paid by revolutionaries' blood, and you get killed. As one see during the 30s in Jingang Mountain in the Red Base area, you heard about 5 encirclements, all right? First 3, they were successfully beaten back, the Chiang Kai-sheks sending these armies, and they were consolidated base. But then they had a wrong line. They trying to defend every inch of the military base, and they got pretty much wiped out almost. That's what caused the Long March. Everybody heard about Long March. Long March, the reason for the Long March, because they have the wrong line trying to defend the Red Base and tit for tat. And you cannot. You just don't have the manpower or the weapons and or the economics and everything. And so wrong line can lead to tremendous defeat. All right. Ultra-left line in the cities during the 30s wiped out 100% communists in the city. And the wrong line, they lost 90% of Red Base in the South. All right? So line struggle is about life and death, about livelihood of the revolutionary movement. If you have a wrong line, you get killed. However, this struggle between the revolutionaries is not the line struggle within the revolutionaries is not a cutthroat competition about leadership of the movement. So that's the difference, all right? Line struggle is a contradiction among the revolutionaries about the means, is not about aims. So how the struggle within the revolutionary movements is different than how the struggle against class enemies. The primary objectives of struggle is not merely to win an argument, but to win the revolution itself. You always have to keep that in mind. To win the revolution, we must unite all those who are subjectively, all right, committed to the cause. And sometimes they do bad things because they don't know how to do better. But as long subjectively they want to make a revolution, we must unite all those who are willing to do this and help them embrace the perspective Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism. The ultimate aim of the struggle is to transform people, to win them over, to expand the revolutionary ranks, not to indulge on posturing merely to says we got to put up a pole here, we got to show what's the right way to do, all right? And so to achieve the unity, we must have to build consensus, all right? With consensus, there can be true unity. Otherwise, it's just a fake, all right? So unity is not merely a, let's all be nice together, all right? We have no disagreement. Let's not show any disagreement. Superficial harmony doesn't work. But rather, concrete effort to build unity among is some kind of a shared consensus. Only through consensus, unity uniting effort to for proletarian, when you have a mass and you got really power. So that's why the slogan, "The people united will never be defeated." But how do you unite it? So they have to have a consensus. They all have to believe in, all right? So when you have differences among the revolutionaries, you got to think, okay, if you think you're right, all right, sorry about if you think you're right, your job is to persuade others. So you got to think about what is the most effective way to persuade others. All right? It's not like trying to knock them down, trying to make them look bad, okay? Trying to show how great you are. That doesn't work. That doesn't build unity. So arguments will be exist in any groups, all right? Because every person has a mind, and no two minds think alike. Even the same mind might think differently in the morning and evening, okay? Besides rational thinking, we humans have feelings and emotions. So we have a rational part, we have emotional part. That's what's human different from AI, right? I mean, AI has artificial humans feelings, and they're not real, right? I don't know. Do they feel pain, really? So difference in thoughts and inevitably lead to a dispute and struggle. All right. However, a vast majority of the working class, the proletariat, desire revolution. Objectively, they are dissatisfied with the status quo and inspired to transform the world. This gave us a material basis to build unity for struggle. Yet, throughout this process, we all the product of class society, all right, and ideology. And so basically, 1,000 years of ruling class ideology permeates, and by osmosis, whatever, we have all kinds of baggage. The revolutionary come to the movement with all kinds of baggages. So basically, for the working class, we know very clearly they know what they don't want. But it's very often you can see people don't have a clear idea what is the way forward. So how to understand the relationship between their own self-interest, their group interest, versus the class interest. It's not something you're born with. So they often know what they don't want, but they frequently lack a clear understanding of the path forward. All right? This is where Marxism, Leninism, Maoism come in, and must step to educate and to explain to people how the class emancipation is how we liberate ourselves. And I hear these right wing that says, you can't even liberate yourself, you're going to liberate mankind. If you can liberate yourself, you don't liberate mankind. All right? I mean, you become, a lot of people say, I'm going to make a lot of money, then I help people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you make a lot of money, there's a lot of people step on to make money, right? Then you give some philanthropy, you're trying to, okay, such a hypocrisy, okay? Wait a minute, I'm trying to see where am I trying to thought, okay? So basically, we have to unite not only the people who believe in Marxism, but also we have to unite with the people who more or less has illusions about reform under capitalism. So, see, this is how people raise their consciousness. They don't just all of a sudden read Communist Manifesto, bam, I'm going to be a revolutionary. That doesn't work. So basically, they have to engage in the immediate oppression in the factory, in the neighborhood, all right, facing eyes oppression. That's where they start. From this, steady so looks like a reform. They see that how to build movement, and eventually they see the limitation of the reform. All right. And so one thing I came to realize is under capitalism, you always have this dichotomy of individual capitalist interests versus interests of capitalists as a class. Example is just, in economics they call it externality. Okay, just means like pollution. All right, the polluters love to keep on polluting. They benefit from it. But eventually, people in capitalism cannot stay. All right, they cannot live under that pollution. So the cut down of pollution helps the capitalist society sustainable. In the 30s, workers fought for Social Security, for union. All these things are not antagonistic to capitalism per se, but is antagonistic to individual capitalists. All right. So individual capitalists quite often do things that harm the interests of the class. For example, the crisis over production. They produce more and more and more. They cannot sell it. They want to make sure the workers who work for them keep their wage low, but they wish other capitalists give the wages higher so they can buy my product. Okay, so there's the individual capitalist interest versus the class interest. That's always happening. Okay, so so basically through this reform movement, you can build working class consciousness, organizations, and militancy. They don't come from vacuum. They come from actual struggle. But also understand there's limitation how much you can go under capitalism. All right. So many reform, there's a glass ceiling how far you can go. So anything that does not harm capitalists as a class, you are achievable. So you can go against racial discrimination, gender discrimination, ethnic, any kind, because those discrimination doesn't help the class, it helps individual capitalists. So basically you go through these, all right, but so all these people want to change, even they want to have a reform, they are your allies. You're trying to win them over. Of course, providing these people are not opportunists. They are not consciously sabotaging the movement. All right? They're not standing in opposition to people's movement. All right? So except these people, you should unite them all. The question is, how do you unite them? All right, that's a different story. I think the best example of educating the working class is to, more than their narrow interest, is to see what the working class did in Shanghai during the Cultural Revolution. And again, I refer to that great book. And Shanghai is a success. Shanghai workers is a success story how to unite to have a class power. All right. I contribute that success in Shanghai to the long tradition working class movement, and so they were able to overcome factionalism, sectarianism, all that. Okay, so I'm sorry, I used a lot of time. We okay? When I start, I said I'm going to be 40 minutes or something.
No, it's good.
I'm not even halfway
You're here
through.
to speak, so don't worry.
Okay. All right. This next point I want to say is that Marxism is a science. It's a science to understand the fundamental laws of governing social development and class struggle. As science, the struggle between different viewpoints within it must be approached with a scientific attitude. Much like the struggle found in the field of physics, chemistry, biology, all right? So basically, in their different views, based on, you have some hypothesis that has not been proven, so people can argue, once that been proven right or wrong, there's no more argument. All right. I mean, well, some lunatic you can always find, but generally, I mean, once the natural science, people argue about unproven hypotheses, but once something is experiment proven, there's no more argument. All right. So in natural science, there's no room for arrogance. But I mean, there are some people arrogant, but generally speaking, facts are facts. I mean, there's no argument. Social science should be the same, if we can call it science. I would say social study. Okay, I mean, people, there's a department of social science. My God, what is science? They're just, what's the word? I mean,
Making up bullshit.
Yeah, it's total bullshit. I mean, just no. I mean, they like to close themselves as science. All right, economic profession telling that there's a science. Okay, they have a regression analysis that make it science. All right. The development of human society is governed by objective laws. The existence of class society is objective phenomena. Okay, I mean, people say you enticing class war. I didn't start it. That's I mean, just like saying I hate gravity. When I jump off the building, I crash. I hate gravity. Okay, but that's objective laws. It's not something you like or not. Okay, that's objective. Consequently, the objective law governing the struggle are same thing as we found for science, for natural science. So basically, we have to once you master the law of nature, you can build cell phones, you can build iPads, you can build all the buildings. All right, because then you mastered the science of nature. If you master science of class struggle, you can change the world, as demonstrated by October Revolution and Chinese Revolution. And that's the power of Marxism. So in society, different groups engage in struggle have different objectives. And so there are two different objectives in struggle. And let's see, one approach, treating Marxism as a form of a capital. I read the whole thing. Have you read that? Okay. Okay, I mean, you heard that, right? So basically, it's a capital to make arguments, all right? So they want to be in the debate, be the top dog and be dominating, all right? Consequently, behave as a condescending, domineering, and or mudslinging, or slandering, or characterize, name calling. I'm not sure what you call it. Labeling you're this or that, and that's the end of the discussion. All right. And any attempt to elevate oneself by disparaging others and personality attacks and all that stuff. Okay. Or sometimes you see their one mistake and you don't see their contributions. I mean, we make mistakes all the time. All right. So you have to also acknowledge your contribution or their corrective place. And it's really hard to hear criticism generally. All right, I admit that, because about 10 years ago I wrote an article in Chinese, and I invited one friend to look at it, and in my house, he says, "This is trash. You have 2/3 garbage. You can condense to 1/3," and he just did, and I was just okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. And as I start my social media, I get attacks. In the beginning, oh God, that really hurts me. Now I have a thick skin. You can say anything. Well, I actually do pay a lot of attention to negative comments. There are a lot of nutrients you can get from it. because they get a feedback. Either you did not explain it clearly, or we have different stands, all right, class stands, all right. I said, Cultural Revolution is great. This is terrible. Tell me what's terrible. Oh, I was sent down the countryside. I was using in the city. I was living great life. Okay, I understand why. All right. All right. I mean, it's like the attitude toward the land reform. I mean, one thing I noticed is very interesting. In growing up in China, you learn about how land reform liberated peasants. It's called liberation. It really means it because peasants were given land from the landlords. But I came to the U.S. in '74. I met some of these students from Taiwan, and they said, land reform, terrible. My family, generations, we accumulate all the land they gave to these hooligans. All right, well, so once I understand you criticize me because we have different class stand, I feel good. I'm relieved, all right? I'm relieved, all right? But if you say something that look like I didn't make clear, okay, then I will try to make it better, all right? Yeah. So the criticism is healthy, actually. We need to learn that. In fact, actually, coming back to thinking about the 1959 Lushan Conference, there were fightings between top echelons of the party. Those Liu Shaoqin, Deng Xiaoping, who are frontline, doing great leap forwards, and they made a mess. And then they have this Ministry of Defense and all these generals, and they don't really appreciate too much Liu Shaoqi, who was not founder of any revolutionary base, but yet is the second in command in the party. Who is he, right? So there are a lot of arguments. And so after heated debate for a month, Mao made a speech and criticized the Minister of Defense, but also criticized front line. He says, why do we have an ear? It's to listen. All right, you got to listen to people. Some harsh work. I mean, you really need to listen. All right, so not everybody can. We really need to train ourselves to listen criticism and to distinguish between what kind of criticism attacking from capitalist point of view or from working class, but have different way of looking things. All right, so so that's the thing about sometimes the struggle, and people criticize you. You find they are very arrogant, they are very domineering, they're very hard to take. Okay, so for the sake of unity, a true revolutionaries cannot be someone have their nose in the air and look down on the others with their revolutionary movement. And a true Marxist should not hold grudges against others who have made mistakes in the past and don't let go. A true Marxist should not split over diverse evaluation of historical events. And I have an example. I have a friend I know in the 80s. He supported the June 4th crackdown. You might call him a tanky. We know those people, right? Emotionally, I have a hard time befriend with him. I mean, this, it's just like you are supporting my enemy. Okay, all right. So, however, he's a staunch fighter against capitalism and was imprisoned many times. He engaged wholeheartedly in the union struggle, in civil rights struggle, and fought like hell against ICE. So you have to unite with these people, okay? I mean, we have different evaluation about history, but what's the relevant that to today? So we have to learn from Lenin, right? We had spent dozen years struggling with Trotsky against, however, when it comes time for October Revolution, Trotsky wanted to join it, come in, everybody, all right? So basically, struggle for unity, not struggle for split. All right. So basically, unite everybody who want to be a part of the revolution. All right. So that is the best example of struggle for unity. Only those revolutionists who are truly armed with the Marxism, who dedicate themselves to the revolutionary cause, will engage struggle for the sake of unity. They regard Marxism as a science and approach the struggle with a scientific attitude. The objective of the struggle is to forge consensus, to persuade and educate in the spirit of curing the disease to save the patient. That was a slogan Mao put forward in the 1942 rectification campaign. I think the curing the disease, save the patient is the most beautiful way of putting this. People who make mistakes, you treat them as they have illness. All right? The point is not to kill them. All right? The operation is success. The patient's dead. All right? The point is to win them over if you think you're right. All right? Win them over. And especially trying to understand what's the root cause for us to have different opinion. Is it because we have different class stand? That would be bad, right? We have different information. We have different analytical tools, okay? And so you got to have that curiosity. That's why I'm saying science, just like a natural science. When we make progress in natural science, it's because scientists are curious. Why this thing is this way, all right? So social, if you want to be a social science, same attitude. How come we fight the same thing? How come we disagree? I want to know why, all right? So that's why we need to argue with the reasons, all right? And trying to get to the bottom of differences. Of course, what is truth? Different class have different criteria for truth. And according to Trump, the whole world is taking advantage of the US. All right? So different class has different truth. All right? What's relevant? What's irrelevant? What is the main thing? What is secondary? All right? So so basically, there's no universal objective. I mean, if you talk about universal objective, anybody ever care about in the garden, there are two ants colony fighting each other. Which one is just? We know what, I mean, we're human. We care about our class. Our judgment of a truth is based on our class interest. And that is, but also the working class happen to also be the class that will transform society and bring us communism. All right, that is the objective condition. Right. I think that's science. Trump doesn't think so. Okay. The hell with him. All right. All right. So comes down to if we treat as Marxism as science, and we treat seeing a different way of using Marxism, then we can see there are two methods of struggle that reflect very distinct worldview. Yeah, we ultimately we're a human. We have emotions. We have distinct personalities and temperaments. And some people says, some people are good in art and literature. Some people are good in natural science. And you have a scientific brain, or you have a emotional brain. I don't know. I mean, there's some truth to that, I guess. I mean, I know my mother loves to play violin, and she's trying to teach me to learn violin. God, I feel sorry for anybody who hear me playing violin. It's like killing the pig. I just don't have that talent. Sorry, I just don't have it. My brother has it. And so we all inherit a different kind of traits. All right, we have strengths and weaknesses and all that. These are human. All right. So basically, So when we offer criticism to others, we must not focus solely on satisfaction that brings to us. Rather, we must consider what form of criticism that's most effective, right? Because we are human, all right? So you got to think about when you argue, debate, argue with people, you got to think what's effective. What if you really truly believe you're right, what's the point trying to win them over, all right? So you got to think about what's the most effective way to win them over, all right? So how to make them accept, all right? So in order to minimize their defensiveness, all right? And this is we're human, and you have to make sure don't make them too. Or I mean, I'm not saying you always touchy feelings and all that stuff, but it's something you have to be considered, all right? So basically, we have to respect the people who have different opinions, and we should engage in very thorough trying to analyze, wholly curiosity, how come they have a different opinion than than ours, all right? So, so that's why I'm saying Marxism is science. We have to adopt a scientific approach to disagreement. We must investigate the root cause and so find out what is it. All right. Okay. I'm way off the time. Let me try to wrap up. Instead of winning the argument, we want to win the war, right? Win the revolution. So that's the key. I'm repeating myself. Okay. Let me see. What time-wise? I don't want to spend too much time. Let me see anything important. Okay, let me see. All right, last point maybe. I skipped a whole lot. It's too wordy. And also, I was just struggling trying to make. I said, well, what be relevant? So I'm trying to say something that's interesting, combine what I was saying before. So it's a lot of. It's not polished. Okay. Toward the end, I like to say about desire for control. The root cause of these, we are better than you. We are more revolutionary. We are more staunch revolutionary. And that attitude, that was the part of the factionalism in China during the Cultural Revolution, the sectarianism. My God, it's just like you. Sometimes you read these memoirs, you stamping your feet, because you know what happened. And then you go back and saying they argue something. My God, you can just imagine during the Paris Commune. The enemy surround you, ready to slaughter you. What you worry about? Elections. That's immaturity, right? They enjoyed that moment. Great, but still immature, all right? They're brave, but that's the thing you see during the Cultural Revolution. They fight over, I want to unite, everybody agree with me. All right. So you can, I even find somebody, about 10 years ago, there's a conference in San Francisco, I think, about the Cultural Revolution. And this guy I know in New York, he's passed away. He says, we want to unite everybody who agree with me. I mean, there's no point of unity. I mean, you agree. So that's not what unity is about, right? So basically, I think part of this thing is people want so much they want to be in control. All right. So in the class society, the struggle for survival instilled people the sense that they have to instinctive urge to control the environment, control their conditions. And so in the class society, the ruling class have desire to control everything. Like Trump is an example, right? Everything has to be in control, right? But a lot of people join the revolution, they carry that mentality the same way. And so basically, they morph itself like, I'm the party leadership, and I want to be in control, right? So they don't have this idea of letting 100 flowers blossom and letting 100 school of thoughts contend. And so they have this very intense desire to everything under control. So this is a phenomenon that you can see in the left also. So you have to, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is off topic, I don't know. And what I see is that among these so-called capitalist voters, conscious or subconscious, and they quite often, they don't have the faith in the masses. And they cannot let go, see what happens and just trust the masses. All right, well, anyway, I think that's enough for now. I don't have any profound things to talk about it. Let me end the presentation 50% over time. And maybe enjoy some more questions. And I don't know what you're interested in, so I should ask you first what kind of things you're interested in. Then I can, yeah, anyway, too late. Damage is done. Maybe that's it. Okay. By the way, I wrote a few articles related to this topic. I wrote it once about class and class struggle during Mao's period, and that's been translated in English. And you can find in bandthought.com, no, .net, and under my name, you should be able to find it. And also, I thinking about once I go back to China, thinking about this issue about what's the relationship between the working class and its vanguard party. All right, so so that's what. By writing this, finally made it clear to myself, multi-party working class doesn't. That's not. I mean, that's a contradiction term because first of all, we're talking about socialized mass production, planned economy, and so we have to have a unified. Anyway, so I don't want to get too diverse too far. All right, so about the cultural revolution, let's just stop there. All right.
I'll make one comment. I wrote down a few things. I'm just going to make one comment and then we'll open it up for questions. You mentioned the 1942 rectification campaign, which is a really essential lesson of Maoism and often overlooked, actually, when people talk about all the lessons from Maoism. In MCU, we basically experienced a significant period of growth between about 2023 and 2024. And after that, we united a lot of people, but there was a lot of, exactly as Fred's describing, some unity around our basic aims. We want to make revolution, we want to have socialism, but differences over means that came up actually. And these are significant differences, problems that impeded our ability to do our daily work. And so what we did was we went and we studied the 1942 rectification campaign as an organization and wrote some documents and discussed and debated how to rectify our own style of work. And this really began at the beginning of 2025. And we have a series of articles that will be coming out in the next month or so on that topic. So if people are interested, because this is a fundamental question in the growth of revolutionary organizations and movements. You grow, there's an upsurge, a mass movement, tons of new people get involved. And then as Fred said, they bring all their baggage. And Mao was strongly opposed to Stalin's view. Stalin said that it's idealism to believe that a party can be purged of opportunism through ideological struggle. But it's totally wrong. Actually, through the discussion and debate, through learning, through working through our differences, that's precisely how you resolve those questions. So you can see our own modest attempts soon in written form to apply some of these lessons that Fred's talking about here. Okay, with that being said, let's open it up for questions. I'll pull like 3 people and we'll go one at a time, but yeah. Okay. I see one there and 2 and okay, 3. Okay, so we'll start there. We'll go after it. So 4.
The book you mentioned about Shanghai, it's called like the English name was the error of I didn't catch it. What the name of the book?
The era of revolutionary rebellion.
It's era, right? Not error.
Era. Yeah, it's a literal translation. Yeah.
The book's not in English at present. Yeah.
Yeah, not in English. Yeah.
Okay. I think 2 back there. I'll just restate the question. Yeah. So the question was if Fred could speak a bit about the dangers of false unity, either in the Cultural Revolution or in Fred's own experience or in China today.
Well, I mean, the example of Wuhan, and the leaders, all different rebel groups are in one hotel, and after a few weeks, finally they come to an agreement reluctantly, and then falls apart. I mean, just I mean, that happens a lot. I mean, if you don't resolve the basic problem, and then you can just have a superficial, temporary unity, because without consensus, you don't have real unity. All right. So, question is how to build consensus. All right. People have to agree on the basic principles, and those times, quite often, you see, I hear a lot of people says, we have principle differences. Yeah, well, there are different categories of principle differences. All right. So we got to prioritize them. All right. What is most important? How that relate to the main contradiction in today's society. All right. So, for example, in the revolutionary movements, inevitably there are sexism, racism, elitism, and is that the principal contradiction? That's not. However, if you don't overcome them, what hinders your ability to make revolution? All right. So you have to understand. All right. People make all kinds of mistakes, and so you struggle with them. God, talking about, last fall, and I went on a tour of the Red Army base in southern China. I go through all these historical sites. They have all different meetings. And in hindsight, we know who's right and who's wrong. But I put myself in there and said, wow, at that time, will I do the right thing? I have no confidence. I have no confidence. Absolutely. How do you know what's right and wrong? My God, it's so complicated. It's terribly complicated. And you have the people join the revolution with all kinds of baggage. So you say we have principal differences. How important that is for the overall struggle. All right. So we have to make sure we make the main enemy, the main task as judging. Is that hurting or hurting? How do we deal with that? Okay. So everything has to take in perspective. All right. And it cannot be a black and white. All right. Either on this issue, right or wrong. Tell me. Okay. And people are complicated. And for example, maybe I should stop. Otherwise, you don't have time to ask questions. And I think pretty much answer your question, maybe?
Yeah. I'll just add one thing to what Fred said briefly, which is that in the US, there's certainly a lot of false unity. I think it's really the other side of the coin, though, of the real sectarianism that exists. And we've seen as a mass phenomena that's been very directly and consciously promoted by the capitalist ruling class in this country, the rise of an extremely divisive form of politics, where if any individual or group is shown to have any element of a backwards idea, especially by the standards of like left liberal HR culture, they're basically derided as the enemy. No, that's not to deny the importance of being square on combating oppressive ideas amongst the people. But if you go and spend any time in a working class workplace, you'll see the working class, they have so many confused and backwards ideas. And this whole puritanical litmus test that a lot of the left around the NGOs especially is consolidated to. Who's your friends left at the end of the day? If you're only friends with those who pass the purity test, it's basically no one except some people who can speak a left liberal NGO style language. Now, I want to be square. The CIA literally talks about this in their memos over how to divide people. They say if people are more afraid of social backlash than seeking the truth, they're much easier to control. And think about what we've seen. And there's a whole right-wing thing of like, oh, canceling people, blah, blah, blah. Like they're like, oh, Ben Shapiro is uncancelable. Okay, fuck Ben Shapiro. But let's be square. The rise of an extremely divisive politics on the left has been so detrimental. That's not that real issues don't exist on the left. There's very serious problems with many groups. But if there's no desire to unify, you can't get anywhere.
The way to measure the degree of ruling class lack of confidence is on how much they spend in the oppressive state apparatus. And the reason you have a freedom of expression because you don't hurt them. And once you start hurting them, and for example, since the Gaza war, all right, genocide, and you're not allowed to say anything bad about Israel, all right? So you can see the more you're free to speak shows more relaxed the ruling class is. And I see no place in the world as relaxed as China during Mao's period in the Cultural Revolution. I mean, that's the most relaxed, most self-confident ruling class. People can speak up. I mean, in the US, you have Biden and Trump go to pick a line. All right. I mean, this shows how relaxed they are about US working class struggle. All right. However, one thing I find is really interesting is that I worked in the US in the 80s, 70s and 80s, about a dozen some years. When I talk about how working class in China were master society, a lot of workers says, why should I be involved in management? Just pay me more, right? They don't have the conscience of should be the master of society. And but that's not true in China. Chinese working class is almost second nature. We should be in charge.
My name is Irene. I'm with the Spartacus League, which is a Trotskyist organization. And I want to say, Comrade Fred, ni hao.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your talk tonight. I want to just say a few things. Like, we have a different perspective, and I really agree 100% about the need for the left to have a united fight and struggle, and also to be able to debate and discuss our differences. I actually was a Maoist in the late 60s. In high school, SDS, Students for Democratic Society, and I was very enthused. Actually, I heard reports about the Cultural Revolution at the time. I was very enthused about the fact that there's so many youth and women in particular involved in the Cultural Revolution. So it's true that for many women, the Cultural Revolution was a massively politicizing event. They were attacking the old customs which helped enslaved women, from the pre-revolutionary China period. But I think if you examine the Cultural Revolution, it actually demonstrates that the key obstacle to national development and for women's liberation is actually the isolation of the Chinese worker state. We call it a worker state. We don't think it's capitalist. It was an isolation of the Chinese worker state and the Chinese Communist Party's strangulation of any possibility for international revolution. Just like in the Soviet Union, which was so isolated from encirclement of vast imperialist powers trying to overthrow the Russian Revolution, the Chinese revolution was isolated. When I was growing up, it was called the bamboo curtain. You had the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. The anti-communist barrage of U.S. imperialism in imperialist countries was the bamboo curtain, to try to overthrow China. So what happened with the Cultural Revolution, in our opinion, Mao was pushed out of the ruling circle of the Communist Party following the Great Leap Forward, which was a disaster economically. He sought to reassert his authority by appealing to the anti-bureaucratic left-wing sentiments of the youth, who were actually disaffected by the stiff social hierarchy. But rather than extend the conquest of the revolution internationally, he sought to mobilize the Chinese masses in an ideological purge of elements within the party that opposed him. And then there was this whole thing about claiming, that there were people who were the emerging capitalist class. They were the moralist purges of the so-called capitalist voters based on bad ideas. But actually, our opinion is that is like an idealist conception, because, you can have debates in the party and debates in society about how to move forward. Like when Lenin was debating with people in the Bolshevik Party about the new economic policy, they weren't all a bunch of capitalist voters. They were actually real debates. But what's the key issue? The key issue is that to tackle the bureaucracy in China, which there was, you needed to have the material conditions to eliminate poverty and scarcity. And as Trotsky laid out, I'm with the Spartacus League, we're a Trotskyist organization. The scarcity, it was the material basis for the bureaucracy. As long as you have scarcity and poverty, you're going to have people who are taking privileges for themselves and just like in the Soviet Union, the whole crap starts over again. So to get out of that dilemma, you have to actually expand the revolution internationally to more advanced countries. So just briefly on the Red Guards, they got more and more hysterical. They were actually turning against working people in many cases. And you mentioned the Shanghai. There was an example of the railway workers in Shanghai. The Red Guards actually made it very clear they intended to hold down wages and intensify labor to the railway workers, including attacking old safety regulations, which did not conform to Mao's thought. So instead of dividing the country between wings of the party, communists should have fought to unite both workers and students in a political struggle against the bureaucracy as a whole. This is contrary to Mao's model and the CP's opposition to him, because they were both based on the fallacy of socialism in one country and peaceful coexistence with imperialism. It's only a few years later that Mao actually sought friendship with Richard Nixon and U.S. imperialism as part of this peaceful coexistence dead-end strategy. And that was when the U.S. was waging a bloody war in Vietnam. So we have a tradition of, Chen Duxiu, who was one of the leaders of the May 4th student movement against Japanese occupation, and was a co-founder of the Chinese Communist Party. He was won over to Trotskyism and saw that it was the only program to point forward the road for Chinese masses, and he was expelled from the Chinese Communist Party for that. Now the Trotskyist program, I'll just say briefly, to what's going on today, there's like President Xi is pushing all this to like ridiculous peaceful coexistence with Trump, peaceful coexistence with U.S. imperialism. What we need is actually, to defend and extend the gains of the 1949 liberating revolution, that we should get rid of the Chinese Stalinist bureaucracy that exists these days, replace it with genuine workers' democracy, and really take on the fight against U.S. imperialism. The proletariat in China, as you mentioned, it's really crucial. I mean, it's a huge proletariat. That is our class, the proletariat in China. And, the Chinese proletariat has a role to play in promoting revolution in China and around the world. For instance, right now, China should be, actually aiding Cuba, which has just run out of oil, where people are like starving to death. China should be aiding the Palestinian struggle. China should be doing all these things. Why? Because, Xi is holding people back by, this peaceful coexistence. Well, the U.S. imperialists are never going to be peaceful as long as, that part of the world is ripped out of the capitalist world market for them. So that is the way forward to have, real program for world revolution to eliminate scarcity on a world scale, so we can bring about the total transition to socialism.
Thanks, Irene. I'll let Fred respond in one second. I just want to say I'm glad for you all to share the perspective. We've been talking, us at MCU at the Spartacist League, over some of our differences in this topic. We've had some productive debates, and in the future we may hold a debate actually to spell out our respective positions more on some of these questions. So maybe a bit of a precursor, but I won't attempt to restate everything you said. I'll just pass it to Fred to respond.
I think you made me feel I really have to spend time translate that book in Shanghai. And I just find, I read some of these Trotsky's perspective on Cultural Revolution. I just feel like they're from Mars or something, totally irrelevant to what's going on. Just like throwing these labels. For example, you're saying that what's going on, Mao is trying to consolidate his power, but that doesn't explain every school, every factory, every farm, everybody's involved. I mean, that just doesn't cut it. And just like, so I suggest you, once I've Google Translate that book, I share that. I met the author. Give you some background on this book. The author is staunch anti-Mao, anti-Cultural Revolution, and she wrote many books denouncing the Cultural Revolution. And later on, she found out those are opinions; they're not facts. And so then she spent 10 years gather materials, interviewed all the participants, rebels, conservatives, cadres, workers, and all the stuff you talked about, and it's in the book. And she has the the pamphlets, the leaflets during the Cultural Revolution, and in the library. And she has the confessions these rebels in prison they have to make, and she interviewed them after they came out of prison, and so it's very well documented. And I talked to about a dozen different rebels who are still alive. They're in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and they say the book's pretty much factual. I mean, there are some things they don't have. For example, the achievements of what the rebels are able to do, but actually all the controversial events, and she documented very well. Very good. I mean, I'd be curious, once you read that, will you change your opinion? And then we can really find out why we have different opinion, okay? So we got to make sure our facts are correct first. All right, that's all. Everything else, you see, we need to have to, let me put it this way. My friends advised me not to engage these kind of debates in the US or in the Western, because I don't know much about Soviet history. I don't know much about what happened, Stalin and Trotsky and all that stuff. I don't read Russian. I don't have the time. But I actually had a lot of very fruitful discussion with a small group of people in China who believe in Trotskyism. And we had a very lively dialogue and debates, and very well, because we have common knowledge of the history in China. So I would say, tell me in the Chinese history which point, which suggestion you suggest that will help. And I don't know, I'm not saying you, but many of these people who believe in Trotsky turn out their ideas, capitalist orders ideas. I mean, so basically on the question of land reform, on the question of collectivization, on the question of how to run the industry and all that stuff, whole series. All right, so that's why I say in the Cultural Revolution, every conceivable ideology manifests itself, even though sometimes they don't know what label to put in there. Because we are human. We have certain, given the environment, we all have that kind of ideologies. And so anarchist, Trotskyist, any kind of label you want. Spontaneous, they came out, all right? And some work, some don't. And so after you read that book, let's have a discussion.
Can you explain some of the advances made in terms of the party during the Cultural Revolution? Like, what did they do to, I guess, encourage and train the working class to be the masters of society in a new way, like from from liberation until the start of the Cultural Revolution? Like, what were some of the advances made?
Well, I think one thing is this semi-independent mass organizations that in the factory is a very powerful force. So anybody in the leadership make decisions, they have to think about how the masses will react to it. And so, so basically, the working class democracy is not a simple just elections, and you need to have a day-to-day on the shop floor. You have issue about production, about personnel, about all kinds of issue, right? And so my experience of working 5 years in the Beijing Guanhua wood factory from 69 to 74, and experience how that factory works. Or you can read the Shanghai the example there. It's just that workers have to, if they're dissatisfied with some people being leadership in a party or whatever role they play, they can present it directly to their face, or writing big character posters, or mobilize people, have a protest. All right, you have all kinds of forms you can do. So basically, what the Cultural Revolution achieved in the industrial setting is to have a very lively workers' participation in the management, active participation. in decision making, in how to run the factory, the personnel assignments, and so that is like every day. And one key thing is that they abolished the mature incentive system of bonus pay. The problem with the bonus pay is that unless everybody see, if you say, okay, we have pocket of money, let's find a way to give everybody. Most people want egalitarian division. And if you will say, okay, the leadership decides who gets more, who gets less, then actually workers lost its ability to challenge the leadership because they worry about they won't get a bonus. Okay, so so I said the necessary condition for the workers is to have a lifelong employment, no fear of being fired, the doctor wage, unless of course they do something terrible, right? So terrible, I mean destroy the machinery or industrial accident or something else, okay? But as far as the challenge in the leadership, they have impunity, and that's the necessary condition. It's not sufficient condition, it's a necessary condition to be a master society, and which was not quite the case before the Cultural Revolution, because you have this mature incentive system that the leadership can give out bonuses, and that stifles the workers' ability to challenge the leadership. So whoever controls your wallet controls you. You know that. Any work condition. Then on this management, for example, you have they have these called a 3-in-1 technical innovation groups. They have technicians, cadres, and workers participate together about how to build better machines or how to run the machine better or any modifications. And I experienced that. I mean, I just saw in my in this Beijing factory, there's one guy he's just so full of ideas. He always think about how to make the work run better. And the controversy, the issue is that the factory has limited funds about what to do. So he might have an argument with the management about, okay, given the limited funds, what's the priority, okay? So the person in charge of production see priority quite often is fulfilling the quota. And this guy see priority is making job easier, okay? So you can see these kind of conflicts that can arise, all right? So, but generally you have a mass line. You have to make sure the leadership, whatever they do, has to have the support or acceptance by the majority of the workers. And I'll give you one example. There was in the early 70s, there was occasion for some of these workers can get a promotion from their classification, and so only certain range. So somebody who's been, well, the higher the class, higher wages. So if you've been working for 5-10 years, is still on the 2nd grade or 3rd grade, and you are eligible for a promotion with their only percentage, like say 40% or 25% of that group can get a promotion. So then we have a discussion. All right, so if you are not very enthusiastic and not working really hard, and we're somebody else who do really great job, workers tend to support the people who are doing better jobs to get a better promotion. However, I experienced that the workers are really caring. They not only just says, okay, who deserves it, but also if somebody's not a good worker, he or she missed the last promotion because she or he did not do a good job, but then now he or she has more kids. The family getting more difficult, all right? So they say, well, the kids should not be suffered because they're parents. Yeah, so we will come up a list, and so in a shop about 100 people, we approve maybe 3 or 4 people, and the leadership have a list, number 3 or 4. These lists cannot be two opposites. And if the leadership, what's the word, veto the workers' list, he cannot lead because you have job security. And so when the leader comes and says, you should do that job, why should I do it? He got a promotion, let him do it. So they have slowed down or just strike even. I mean, see, that's the thing about the Cultural Revolution. Nobody docked the pay for participating in Cultural Revolution. That's why they're so enthusiastic. All right. So, and how to make people work at production and participate in the management, all that. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a real change. And also in education. Oh, I don't want to elaborate too much. Is that enough for the little bit? Okay.
So in MCU, we have been talking more about like the current situation in China and putting forward our position that it is a capitalist imperialist country. And we've been getting a lot of criticisms, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you would maybe respond to those criticisms, or how you would try to win those people over who say, well, yeah, China is clearly socialist because they'll put billionaires in jail. If they're too corrupt. They're helping out with infrastructure projects in Africa. These kinds of arguments. How would you approach those kinds of?
Well, I think I will have dialogue with them, find out why they think that's socialism. All right, and say so. What they think socialism mean. All right, in terms of infrastructure projects. Well, Japanese built a lot of infrastructure projects in Northeast China. I mean, contribute greatly to Chinese GDP. All right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I mean, millions of people live out of poverty, and they're just all these are not criteria. I mean, so sometimes I can understand why they. I mean, I know one old lady from Ireland, and she teaches Marxian philosophy and everything. She comes to China, participate in this World Marxist Forum. I mean, she was part. She on the Sino-Soviet split. She's on the side of Soviet Union, and so I talked to her. I try to understand. So I find out she feels we need some hope. We need some hope. All right. So she's all against capitalism. So they need a hope. All right. So they think China is the beacon light of humanity. My God. Okay. So I said, well, October Revolution didn't come because there's a model. All right. I mean, you don't need that as your reason. I mean, that's really. So I said, I mean, I have dialogue with her, and we argue, and she said, you really make me feel uncomfortable about my belief system. You're shaking me up, and you got to make me thinking I can't sleep and all that. I'm sorry, but all right. I mean, you want an honest dialogue, and this is what you have. All right. So. I think have a dialogue with people. I mean, they attack you. I mean, some people attack they find anything to attack. All right. So have dialogue with the people. I mean, I think that will help understand where they come from, why they think that. All right. So that's what I think. If we treat Marxism and science the same way, it's like you're doing natural science. All right. So you basically try to understand where they come from, see what makes us difference. All right, so we have concrete analysis and then debunk all these not Marxian way of analyze things. All right, I mean, you cannot go by how many people left poverty and talk about that. Industrialization in the U.S. left so many people from poverty. Okay, I mean, just like, come on. What we need to understand. See, they say they locked up billionaires. Okay, we need to understand. China has the largest single monopoly conglomerate in the world. If you don't understand that, you cannot understand China. Because look at the Fortune 500 list of companies. 20% belongs to one entity, Chinese state. They have 5 banks, 3 telecommunication companies, I don't know how many airlines, and they have all kinds, these subsidiaries. They are managed competition. And some people might heard my telling the story. Shall I repeat that? I mean, I just give you a sense what that party-state conglomerate means. About 25 years ago, 20 years ago, these 3 cell phone companies engage in cutthroat competition. They all belong to the state government, but they were given incentive in your sales volume, everything. If you satisfy these things, you get a perks and get a promotion. So they engage in the cutthroat competition, and then one day the state rotated CEO. All right? Just like Ford CEO become General Motors. And that stops the cutthroat competition. And China was engaging, they built this massive bullet train network. And also there's a real estate boom, so a lot of cities are prepared to build subways. So they need a lot of rail cars. And if you don't have competition, then the Chinese rail car company will ask for sky-high prices. We know monopoly, that's what they do. So the state said, okay, we have to introduce competition. What do you think? How do you introduce competition? One of 2 things. Introduce foreign company or divide the Chinese into 2. What do you think they do? They do the latter. They divide the Chinese railcar manufacturing into 2. One northern railcar, one southern, competing each other for subways, for bullet trains, and they're getting so good. China has the most bullet trains in the world, fast, safe, so far safe, okay? And then they're getting too big. The Chinese market is saturated. They go outside. They start competing Latin America, competing Europe, and the Chinese, they look at around the world, all these cities, contrasts, finally have 2 companies. Which 2? Southern China, Northern China, competing each other. No, stop that. They combine together. All right? So when you talk about billionaires, these are private capital. They are not this party-state conglomerate. All right? So you cannot use the Western monopoly groups are competing for power, for stuff. This is the largest single capital conglomerate. It managed competition. And it can strategize. For example, 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, they realized the future energy, China requires like 70% oil is imported. They said that is a vulnerability we cannot sustain. So they pour money into renewable energy, wind, solar, and electric cars. And paying off controls that kind of stuff. Then everything become understandable. Otherwise, I can see some people think socialize means socialism. Okay.
I'll just add a couple things to what Fred said. The fundamental question here is a concrete analysis of the relations of production in a given country, the relations of production and how production is carried out in society, the ownership pattern of the means of production, who owns and controls and directs production. Lenin constantly warned against members of the Bolsheviks who mistook the legal form of ownership for the actual nature of the ownership. The second, people's mutual relations in production. And the third, the distribution. If you analyze a country according to these three patterns you see throughout China, everything there happening today is capitalist. You have private ownership. Even when you have the party state conglomerate, you have functional ownership by private forces. What do I mean? When the German bourgeoisie, before World War I, nationalized the electrical industry, did that mean that because there was state nationalization, that this was suddenly a socialist industry? No. The confusion on these matters are bequeathed to us not by Marx, but by the Second International, which tended to reduce the relations of production, and Kautsky in particular, though he's only one of them, to the question simply of ownership, and principally socialism was reduced to state ownership. This was based on the idea that you could peacefully transition to socialism through increasing state ownership, which the German Social Democratic Party in the early 20th century had a material incentive to promote, the leadership of it, at least a lot of them, not all of them, because they were in positions of sitting in the state, in the parliament. And this was really the rise of the revisionism and Bernsteinianism. So in order to actually go to what Marx said, go to what Lenin said, go to what Mao said, we have to get beyond a very simplistic, empirical, surface level analysis that says, oh, there's some state ownership and there's, hammer and sickle, so therefore it's socialism. And actually, if you look at the US bourgeoisie, you'll see there's not a party state conglomerate here, but there's plenty of members of the state bourgeoisie. I mean, look at Obama. Look at Anthony Fauci. Look at a whole bunch of the generals. The generals, look, a one-star general makes roughly as much as a teacher, a public school teacher in Massachusetts who has a PhD, who's been there for maybe 5-10 years. Is the public school teacher a member of the bourgeoisie? Clearly not. Is the general member of the bourgeoisie? Obviously. So we have to get beyond a very simplistic idea of what the bourgeoisie is, based off of a surface level reading of Marxism, which has nothing to do with what Marx actually wrote. And there's a utility to simplifying certain concepts, but there's also a process whereby the abstraction becomes violent, meaning it has nothing to do with the actual reality and the actual material relations between people. And that's what we see ultimately sustaining the views that China is a socialist country and a progressive force. That, and as Fred noted, some people who are very nihilistic and hopeless, and they want to believe in lesser evilism, not of the Democratic Party, lesser evilism on a global scale. And this leads us domestically nowhere, as we see for everyone voting for the Democrats for the last 50 years or whatever. It leads us internationally nowhere too. So I think we'll wrap there unless you want to add anything, Fred.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of questions, but I because especially what you said, I need to really get a book translated in Google. Then I can share. You can put on. I don't know. I mean, once it's translated, you can put on the web or something. Yeah, just for people to study and figure it out.
All right, thank you all for coming. Feel free to hang out, chat after. Thank you, Ted.